Hi, thanks for joining me today. I am Kim Howard, and I am Eastern Kentucky's field training coordinator, so most of the time I'm in classrooms. I just want to give you a few directions. Feel free to ask any question or make comments at any point throughout the presentation by typing your question in the question box and clicking send. If you cannot see the question box, click on the orange box with the white arrow in the upper right corner of your screen to open the question box area. I will answer all questions at the end of the presentation. Just click. So today is the second part of structured work systems, and we're going to talk specifically about teacher workstation. So hopefully today we're going to review the components of structured work systems. You will hopefully leave with ideals for increasing academic demands across multiple subject areas using the structured work system framework. And you will also leave with an understanding of how to create work systems in both the home and the school environment. So we know that learners with autism are very visual. We know that they need above and beyond what visual strategies that we do for most people. So I use a calendar in my life, and we know that children with autism need their own personal individual schedule as a replacement for like your daily planner. So a structured work system is just a way to take learning visually, make it more visual. Can't get it to click. There we go. It's gone. So what is a structured work system? It's just purposeful organization of learning materials to assist learners with autism in answering some questions. So the first question is, what am I supposed to do? And so the way that that's answered is that materials are placed in baskets or placed in bins on a shelving system or along a table. How much work am I supposed to do? So you just look at the baskets. How many baskets are there? And also the use of a mini schedule. So another question that's answered is, how will I know when I am finished? Well, all the baskets are gone. And also if you're using a mini schedule, then there are no icons left on your work area. So what do I do next? You should have a schedule card or an icon to refer the child back to their schedule or to a choice board if that's how your work systems work. So there are a ton of potential benefits. What I have seen with students is that in the classroom that I worked in previously, a lot of my children came to me and they did not know how to sit down to attend to a task. They did not understand how to learn. So before I could teach academic skills, I had to teach them how to learn and give them a process in order to be able to learn. And I found for me that structured work systems was a great visual tool that I could use with a variety of children with autism, from very high functioning to students who were more severely affected. So potential benefits are building independence, and it's a great way to generalize skills to other environments. A lot of times once I taught work system in my classroom in a resource setting, then I could branch work systems out to the regular classroom. So my students were more able to be included in the regular classroom because they understood the structure of the work system, and it gave them a way to participate in the general education environment more independently and more successfully, since they had a visual way to learn. And it can extend your time on task and independent work. For some of my students, when they came to me, their time on task was maybe 30 seconds, which is not very much time on task. And that was with an adult or an aide sitting with them, trying to keep them focused on the task. And what I found was that even my most severely challenged students that had very minimal time on task, if I was consistent in using my structured workstations, they quickly, over a period of time, I was able to increase their time on task to 15 minutes or 20 minutes before they needed to break, before they needed a choice time or a break in instruction, and then we came back to work. So it was a great tool in my classroom, and it was one of the major work systems that I used to teach kids. And it's also a good way to maintain mastered skills. So in independent workstation, you can cycle back through skills that you need to maintain mastery of. So this is just a visual picture of a workstation, and this is an independent workstation, and we're going to talk about two different kinds. I'm just going to go back over a little bit what a workstation looks like. So this is an independent workstation. This is a station that a student would be expected to work at on their own, and you see it says bins and containers, so here are your containers, and this work system is going, all work systems should go from left to right. They are all should be set up from left to right, and this one has a mini or a matching schedule kind of right here, and the student is going to work from the left, pull the basket to the table, complete whatever's in the basket, and then put it into this laundry basket here on the floor, which is their finished basket. And you definitely want to make sure there's minimal distractions. This student might be able to handle having the pictures on the wall, and some students might not. One way that I worked in student interest sometimes was in my students' independent workstation. There might be a picture of a favorite cartoon character that was, you know, one of their favorites, or some positive picture that they enjoyed. I had a student who enjoyed shoes, and so she had a picture of shoes or a cow on her desk, some of the things that she enjoyed, so we incorporated that into her independent workstation. So this is just another picture of a left to right work system. You have your bins and baskets on a shelf, and you see that they've put a curtain to kind of take away the distractions of whatever else is on that shelf. And they're going to pull their basket off, pull it onto the desk area here, and then they're going to complete that task and put it in the basket. And in an independent workstation, it should be work that students are able to do on their own. If they make a mistake, I never corrected in independent workstation. I corrected at teacher workstation. So I would go back over with them what they had done wrong and kind of correct the teaching there. So and we'll look at what goes into an independent workstation. So this is a different system, and that it's just a matching station. So the student has icons here. It looks like Toy Story to me. So the dinosaur, the little bear, and probably that is a favorite activity for this child, or a favorite, a high interest for that child. So that's one way that they've incorporated their interest in his mini schedule. So whatever icon is first, say it's the Mr. Potato Head, he's going to pull Mr. Potato Head off of the table, the little picture icon. He's going to match it over here, and then he's going to bring that basket to the table, complete that work activity, and then there's a finished basket just out of the picture that you can't see. And then he's going to finish all that are on his mini schedule. And then the last item, the last icon, it looks like a trampoline to me, and so then at the end he knows when he's done with these items that he gets a choice or a break. This is a portable work system for my students that were included in the regular classroom. This is something that we use frequently. It's just a 3-ring binder with some folders in it. You have a to-do side and a finish side. Those might be in pictures or might not be. It depends upon the reading level of your student. So they're going to start out on the left side with what they need to do. They're going to do that work, and then they're going to finish it on the right side. And for my students that were in the regular classroom, sometimes their to-do said participate in small reading group for 20 minutes. And so they knew that they needed to go to the small reading group area and participate for 20 minutes, and then they would come back, put that in finished, and then they would open up their structured work system and do the orange folder, number 2. And it might be the same worksheet that all the other students are doing, or it might be modified. It just would depend upon the student's needs. And then they would do the third item, which could be anything. Maybe it's a writing task, maybe it's a math task. It would be whatever. I tried to make it be whatever the other students were doing, so that my students were doing the similar items. And then even sometimes teachers ask me, even in the regular classroom, you give your students, they work and then they get a choice, right? They get a break. Even in the regular classroom, it was a deal with my kids. They knew when they completed the work in their independent workstation or their teacher workstation, they knew that at the end they got a choice of a fun activity or something that they enjoyed. So I tried to work very hard with my regular education classroom teacher to find out what choice time activities would be available for my student in there, so that he wouldn't be disruptive for the other classmates, but that he still got that needed break for the student. So this is a video which we're not going to watch because it probably won't play well necessarily out there for everyone, but you can go to this link at YouTube, and what it shows is actually two adults who I think are students going through a workstation, an independent workstation, and it's probably one of the better examples that I found out there. So you can look at that later, and it kind of takes you through step by step exactly how a student would use a matching workstation. So who might need a workstation? Who do we know that might need a workstation? And that's what I get. Anyone can use a workstation. Students full inclusion. I've had students in self-contained classrooms. In the middle, I have seen these be used in a home environment. Parents that for homework, students who bring home homework that have set up workstations at home. Also parents who have students who need or children who need direction in the evening. Their independent workstation might be play activities, structured play activities that are placed in there to help them, give them that routine. And what I have found in both school and home is that once students learn the routine, that they enjoy it. They really enjoy working in an independent workstation or in a teacher workstation because it meets that need for sameness, and it meets that need for the visual structure. So it's calming, and I found for some of my students, if they got very upset, they would request to work in independent workstation because the routine and the organization kind of gave them a way to self-calm. And also work settings. I have seen this be used in like group work settings, and I can't remember the name for that right now, but I've seen this be used in work settings, structured work settings, students who are, packaging items, students who are putting together silverware in a restaurant, kind of those types of things. I have seen structured workstations be used for that. And also one of the neater ones that I have seen or heard about is in North Carolina, Chapel Hill's Teach Project. They do the independent work task, the shoebox task, and those are made by students with disabilities in a structured work system through them, and it's all set up in a workstation. So this is how we're going to just look real quick how to implement a workstation, which we looked at this last time, but I just felt like it was a good slide, and if people hadn't set to the other one, they would need to know this. So on the left-hand side, you're going to have a shelf or a table that can contain bins of some kind. So you see the little different colored bins, and then you have your schedule here. A schedule is very important. All of my students had schedules that use workstations. They're going to pull the item from the left. They're going to work at the table do the item at the table, and then they're going to place it in the finish box. And then they're going to repeat that over and over until it's done. And the way that worked for me, all of my students had different amounts of work in there. They knew that some of my students might have only had 2 baskets because their tolerance was, they could only handle 2 baskets. And then some of my students had 4 or 5 baskets because they had a longer ability to stay in work system. And usually what happened a lot of times was my students would start out with just 1 or 2 baskets in workstation, and then we would build over time. And by time I mean months. Probably some of my students, it took months to build up to 4 or 5 work baskets, but it was very successful for my kids, and it was a great tool in my classroom. So these are some really good examples of finished baskets, and I don't think I went over that very well last time. Finish is an important concept for our students, and this is great because I have generalized this to other areas. Once they learned it in workstation, then I was able to generalize what finished meant. So when toys were done, we had a finished basket for toys. So it was a great way a great tool that I could generalize to other concepts in my day. So, and a finished basket can be anything. I've used laundry baskets. I've used big totes. This is just a line drawn on the table, and it says finished here. I had students who If they had a basket for finish, then they would sit in the basket and play in the basket, and so the basket became a distraction. So I did tape on the floor and taped an area off, and I just put finish, so when they were done with their baskets and bins, they just stacked them in the floor beside their work area. So what type of work can go into a structured work system? And these are independent. What we're going to look at first here is independent. So this example here are shoebox tasks, and those are for sale through North Carolina. I'm not sure where. Anyways, they are actually a whole set, but you can build your own, and there are a lot of great examples out on the internet. If you just Google shoebox task examples, then you'll find a ton of items, and I made a lot of my own, because once you have students who use them, you'll need a big variety, because that is definitely a failing that I see, is sometimes students are doing the same work in their structured independent workstation for a month or 6 months. So kids get bored with it. So you want to make sure that you're including a big variety. So a lot of times I made my own structured work baskets, my own shoebox task. You just buy the little plastic bins. You can pick those up just about anywhere. And I used a Dremel tool, a little small Dremel tool, and I'm not a power tool person. So I'm pretty much frightened of anything that makes a loud noise. So if I can do it, I'm sure anybody can do it. And or you can use an X-Acto knife to cut out the square, cut out the little pieces to make your items. But the first one or two, kind of turned out kind of, pretty sad looking, but you get better with practice. So also in a structured work system, matching items, these are just different file folder type tasks, and there are also a ton of websites out there to where you can find file folder tasks. So these are just matching, and this is a Christmas one, so they're matching. And I found that with a lot of my students, matching was a skill that we got pretty quickly, so it was good to go into an independent work system. And this is kind of just numbers. So this student is matching, putting the numbers in order, and we're counting pennies here. And what this does is he's going to put the pennies up onto to count out 8 pennies. So it's a great way to review those tasks. And this is a more for a vocational setting or a student who's working, or middle school, high school. So they are going to roll silverware up. So, and this is just a little silverware tray, your knife, your fork, your spoon area. They pick one up of each. They get their napkin, lay it down, and then roll them together, which is a job task, and it's a skill that they can use when they hopefully are able to work. And this is just party favor packaging. You're going to pick one of each party favor up, place it into the bag, and then place it into a finish box. And so this was a neat task for older students, high school students, and you could have them package a lot of different things, or and look at a lot of different work items that they might be able to do through structured work system. And this might be an independent task, or this might be a task in the beginning probably that you're going to have to teach, so you would teach it at Teacher Workstation, which we're going to talk about next. I love Teacher Workstation. I found that it was one of the most effective ways to teach my students, because they knew the routine of independent workstation, so it gave me the ability to take them over to bring them over to a table and to set up the same system with the baskets, and have them work on items with an adult that they could not do independently. So it took the guesswork out, because a lot of times when kids that came to me that had worked in other settings, they did not want to sit down at a table with an adult because they didn't know how long they were going to be there. They might be there indefinitely, and sometimes, my students, I found that their version of time and my version of time was very different. Something that a task that took maybe 5 or 10 minutes, in their view of time, it felt like hours. It felt like they were there for hours. So what I like about setting up a teacher workstation is that it's very visual. Kids can see right away, there's 2 baskets, there's 3 baskets, there's 1 basket. My kids, I always let them look into the basket before we started, and it was something that it gave them the ability to build choice into the day. And so for me, most of the time, it did not matter what order we did the baskets in Teacher Workstation in. So we were doing a math activity, we might be doing a reading activity, I might be working with Handwriting Without Tears. So it didn't matter what order we went in. So my students would look in the baskets and then make their choice. and they would pull the basket out, and we would do the item together at the table. And usually, teacher workstation, a basket task might take 5 or 10 minutes. I try to keep it short, especially in the beginning. In the beginning, a teacher workstation task might only take a minute. You know, I didn't want students to feel tortured by having to stay there for a long time, especially if they had a short attention span. And so what we did was we built up time over months or weeks and even over years sometimes with students. And I found that you were able to keep on going kind of indefinitely. So this lady on the left, you can see she's sitting on this side of the table and the little boy's on the other, and she's sitting across from him. And so there's baskets on this shelf that you cannot see, and they've pulled this item out of the basket, and then they're going to do the task together, and then he's going to finish in a basket off to the left, off to the right. And on the second picture of this, the kidney table, you can see she has her teacher's materials below, and this is, I didn't always have a separate place for teacher workstation, and I would never ever do independent work and teacher workstation at the same place because I didn't want to confuse my students. And so in classrooms that have small space and you don't have a lot of space to make, you know, teacher workstation and independent workstation, what I have seen done and what I have done is I've used a kidney table, and during teacher workstation time, there were just baskets. I would place the baskets out on the table and a finished box for my students. And I still make sure that I maintain that left to right, that we were working always left to right. Left to right is a pre-reading skill. We need to know that work items and school items, task items can go from left to right. So this is just kind of, I try to think about how I use teacher workstation, and I know a big thing is alternate portfolio, and so I'm not going to go in depth about everything that I would teach, but I just wanted you to see how I would break up what I would put into teacher workstation and what I would put into independent workstation. So this is a 4th grade science standard of life cycles of plants and animals, and then you also have to compare them. I know it's testing window out there, so hopefully may your alternate portfolio test be done. But this is what I would do. So in my teacher workstation, I would read books with my kids. So if these books were long books and my child did not have a long attention span, then I would make it more like a story-based lesson and shorten, you know, take out some of the words but still keep the same concept. So in teacher workstation, we would read a book together and possibly answer questions. And then in independent workstation, to reinforce that skill, is a matching puzzle. So this is the life cycle of a butterfly. So most of my kids were fairly independent with puzzles, or at least, you know, this is what I would use with a student who was independent with puzzles. So in independent workstation, they would work on a puzzle, putting together the puzzle of the life cycle of the butterfly. In teacher workstation, I might make this lovely craft about a chick, the life cycle of a chicken. So we might make this craft together at teacher workstation. So all the items that I would need for this project would be in a basket. They would be in one basket. And then this is sort of not really a puzzle, but kind of like a puzzle, and it would depend on the level of my student. This second with the silver cookie sheet with the life cycle of a butterfly, this might be an independent task. If the student is able to put together the life cycle of their self, you can see that this one is a little bit harder in that they don't have a picture to match back to. They don't have a picture to be able to match it back to the original picture, so they would have to know, you know, number 1 is the egg. They'd have to already know that. So it might be an independent workstation if they were at that level, and if they weren't, then this would be a teacher workstation. This would just go into a basket. So this is another example of kind of the life cycle of a butterfly. So this would probably be teacher workstation. It has a lot more parts to it. You see a lot of arrows, and this is just kind of a art project, putting it together, putting the pieces back in the right way. This is a life cycle of a pumpkin, and they've just kind of putting it in some very pretty visual pictures. This would probably be, it has a lot of parts to it, unless I had a jig, if I might have a little hint on the paper plate about what went there. It would depend upon the level of my students, and that's going to be important for you to know, is where is your student at? What work do they need help with? What work do they need, what work are they able to do independently now? But this is one way that I would reinforce and teach the concept of life cycles. So this is another example. This is definitely a teacher workstation where you can see the student has written some answers. They've also drawn some pictures. So we would go through it together, and this would be an item that might potentially be in a work basket in teacher workstation. So how do we incorporate other academic demands into teacher workstation? So I taught pretty much almost all academic demands through teacher workstation. And so these are just different examples of things that I have taught or worked with in teacher workstation. So this picture here is an addition problem. You can see some students at different points would need, definitely in the beginning of teaching, you would teach this together. And you can see that it's very visual. So your top numbers are blue, your bottom numbers are pink, and your add-in, your answer is white at the bottom. And so then they have number tiles over here that they're able to actually count that out. So the blue corresponds to the top number. So they know for this problem they need 4 blue tiles. They know they need 4 red tiles. They're going to put all those out and then come up with their answer. And that's something that we would work together in teacher workstation. This other file folder game is measurement, which is a 3rd grade alternate standard. So we definitely measured. And the way that I kept my students from memorizing the answers was I had lots of different file folders with things to measure, and this is a good way to incorporate interest. But then I also had file folders to where I could change out what they were measuring. So this time it's different cartoon characters. Next time, these would just be Velcroed on, the little, like Dora, you could remove those characters and put down new characters of different sizes. And so it gave them it kept them from memorizing the answers. This folder up here is just sort of sorting meats versus breads. This might be an older student, maybe somebody who's in a life skills class, and so they needed an activity during life skills today looking at different meats and breads, and so for this child it was appropriate to have them just sort what is a meat, what is a bread from side to side, and so you have your little pictures in the top. And then down here, this is an item for reading. And I did a lot of teaching of reading in teacher workstation. And so here's bus. You're going to find the letters up here. And it's very visually structured. You can tell there's a square for each letter of bus. The letters are up here. And it takes the guesswork out for the students. That's the goal of teacher workstation, is to take the guesswork out and also to take the stress out. For both teacher and student, hopefully. And I use this one all the time, the vegetable garden measuring. So we would measure different vegetables, and it made a nice file folder task inside of teacher workstation. So you can make this to where you can interchange your vegetables or mix them up and move them around so that students aren't just memorizing where answers go. Or you can make this be lots of different choices for you to choose from, lots of different vegetables that you can measure, so you have multiple file folders of the same concept. And I had some of both, a little bit of both when in my classroom. A lot of times we were teaching name concepts for younger elementary students, so that was something that I frequently taught, was how to spell their name during teacher workstation. And you can see this one is actually in a box. So it's just a stamp activity. The teacher's written it into the squares above or stamped it in, and then she's made boxes, one box for each letter of its name. And then I like this because a lot of times I've seen this be done in kindergarten. A lot of kindergarten classrooms, they stamp out words and they stamp out their names, but there are 50 stamps out. And so it's very hard sometimes for kids to find the right stamp for the letters of their name, and it's a hard visual discrimination skill. So in this task, they have only put in the letters of its name. They have taken out the guesswork in that all he has to do is get them in the correct order. He doesn't have to hunt, for the letter J amongst 40 other stamps. So I thought that was a pretty good visually structured task for teacher workstation. This is counting. So the student is going to take the bear out and place it on a dot. take the bear out and place it on the dot to make the number 2. And what I like about these is that once you have taught them in Teacher Workstation and a child is able to do them with some skill on their own, then you move them to Independent Workstation. And I think when teachers look at those two workstations together, as I always looked at them as a team. So you have Teacher Workstation and you have an Independent Workstation. So once you've taught something in Teacher Workstation and you're at the point to where the student just needs to practice it to keep it in his repertoire, then you move it to Independent Workstation. And by doing that, by teaching new items in Teacher Workstation and then moving them to Independent Workstation, then you're keeping the material in Independent Workstation fresh. It keeps it from becoming doing the same activity for a month or 2 months or a year. This activity is a reading activity, and there are a lot of letters with this one. That was my only thing with this one. There are a lot of letters, but I'm going to assume that this child was a little higher functioning and able to sort through those letters. And so he is going to flip through the icons, and he is going to spell out the word car. So maybe this is this child's spelling words this week. Maybe these are just reading words that he is working on learning to read. You could use it either way, but it would be really easy just to change out the picture items and the word cards every weeks, every couple of months, whatever is appropriate for your student, whatever level and speed that they're able to work at. And then the second picture is a hot weather versus cold weather clothes item. So they are looking for items that they can wear in the winter versus summer, and then sorting them. So that's a good skill. So that could go either way. That might be a Teacher Workstation task in the beginning and then move to Independent. So this is boys versus girls, and on this side of the screen, it's empty. They haven't done it yet. So you see boys at the top and girls, and you see your little baggie in the middle with the cards. And then over here you can see that they've sorted. What are pictures of boys? What are pictures of girls? And I like that it uses the symbols for the bathroom. I like that it uses those symbols for the bathroom because it gives them a real life skill that students are hopefully going to be able to take with them throughout life. They're going to need to find restrooms in public places and need to be able to identify boys versus girls. So pitfalls to avoid. Some of the biggest things that I see is not knowing the needs of your learner, so not knowing what level they're working at. And sometimes we think students are higher than they are, or sometimes we think no, they don't understand that concept, so they're not ready to move on with it. So it sometimes is a balancing act to find the right level of work for students. It's definitely a pitfall if you have students work only in independent work systems. They should not only be working independently all day long. They should hopefully have group time, and they should also hopefully be working with a teacher and working in small group as well. So those are important things to remember, because I've seen some really great classrooms, but their students go in and out of independent work system or workstation all day long, from choice to independent workstation, which is okay, but students need to be taught new skills. So, and the only way they're going to be able to be taught that is through an adult, hopefully a teacher. They have a great teacher. So also having too many distractions inside or around the work system. So I was in a classroom and they had an independent workstation, and they wanted the student to be in here by themselves and do the work, and they had placed it right next to the classroom door. And so the student would run off, and it gave him very close access to the front door of the classroom, and so it was too much of a temptation to run out the door, so we had to relocate his work system. And also if you are in a classroom that has a play area, like an independent play area, you might not have your independent work area in direct line of sight to the play area, because for students that are supposed to be working independently and they see someone else playing with their favorite toy, it could create problems. So that's just something to think about, is the location of your independent workstation specifically. And then for Teacher Workstation, you want to think about the same thing. If you have a student who has trouble with eloping, well, you wouldn't want to set yourself to where you're away from the door but they're closer. For students who struggle with distractions. So maybe you wouldn't have teacher workstation, which is where you're working one-on-one with a student, next to independent play or next to a loud group that was going on. So you would have to think about those things. And also having too many distractions inside. For some of my students, they were very distracted by the finish basket. And so, and we needed to have some way to finish. And so we simply took away the finish basket itself and put tape on the floor and made a box out of tape and used that to place their finished items in. And I placed a Mayor Johnson or an icon symbol for finished in that location so that everyone would know that's what finished meant. Also, students sometimes will memorize the answer. And that's a danger when you have students who are working and you, both in teacher and independent workstation, they're using the same materials for a very long time. They'll eventually memorize the answers. So it's important to think about not always stapling down all the pieces. Maybe you place them on with Velcro, place them onto the folder with Velcro, or maybe you make multiple examples of the same item. So you're teaching measuring. So in one file folder, they're measuring their favorite characters, and another file folder, they're measuring fruit. Maybe they're going to measure the sizes of books. You're going to have to think about that. And sometimes with mine in teacher workstation, I put real items in there. I might put, some different toys that they enjoyed, and so we would measure those toys. So you have to think about that, so you're not always doing the same items over and over. You have to think about how you're going to teach that concept and teach it in a variety of ways so that students will be able to both generalize the skill but not also just be able to give you the correct answer because they've memorized it. Memorize the work task itself. And this is the hardest one. Pieces of the work task will go missing. That is very frustrating. Kids eat them. Sometimes the file folder pieces, I've had students carry them out in the bottoms of their shoes because they liked them so much, or hide them in their clothing because they liked the pieces so much, and so they wanted to take them home. And then also, they're Velcro, so they fall on the floor, and my janitor would, sweep them up and throw them away sometimes on me without realizing what they were. They just looked like little bits of nothing. And so when you make a work task, I always try to remember to print myself an extra copy and, maybe laminate that at the same time and not necessarily cut it out, but I tried to have a folder of work task pieces. That way when something went missing, I could replace it easily, because what would happen to me was I would find this great website and then I would print out everything that they had on a snow day. I would go crazy and print out however many file folder tasks my ink cartridge would let me, and then I never thought about, well, what do I do when I miss pieces, when the pieces go missing? So now I try to remind myself, print 2 copies so that I have an extra set, so when I lose pieces, or print 4 copies, it just depends on your classroom. And then not using student interest to motivate learning. This is a great area where you can incorporate student interest. I know sometimes it's hard, and students sometimes, especially with autism, have interests that are not typical. But the way that I have tried to do that is because I want independent workstation and teacher workstation to be a place where they want to come. I want it to be a place to where they know good things are going to happen and they're going to get reinforcement there. And so sometimes I would just do the simple thing of putting a student who liked keys and cows, and so I had taped a picture of keys and cows on her workstation, and so while she was working, she would look up at that sometimes and point to it, and that was okay, and then she would go back to work. But it gave her something in there that she was interested in. And maybe for some of her folders, if we were doing activities, maybe we put the alphabet letters on a cow, a picture of a cow, or maybe somehow we incorporated those. Those are just different ways that you can think about incorporating students' interest into learning. These are some really helpful websites. You can click on any of those. They have examples of file folder games, and I like file folder games for both teacher workstation and independent workstation because they are clear cut. You only do however much work is on this file folder. We know that it's not like when you read a book might be 100 pages, but maybe you were only going to read 10, but the student doesn't understand that. But when you work out of a file folder game or a file folder task, it's very clear cut. I only have 10 pieces here to work with. So when these 10 pieces are placed onto the folder, then this item is done. So it answers those questions, and it takes out some anxiety for students, and especially for students that struggle with fine motor skills and with writing skills. File folder games and file folder work tasks are a great way to take out that writing piece, at least for some of it. I know writing is very important, and I definitely taught that, but I like file folder tasks for that. And these are 3 great websites. The File Folder Fun, and they all have free items on them. That's why I put them on there. It's because they all have items that are free. I was a poor teacher, and my district, who I loved, didn't always have the funding to buy everything that I needed. But all of these, if you get on them and look, you can find links to free items. So that was my favorite things. That's why I picked these 3. So, and you can also Google. There's a ton of file folder tasks out there, and also a ton of shoebox tasks out there. And that's how I originally got started with all of that. Was I Googled and found quite a bit of different stuff out there. So, how do I find the questions? Does anybody have any questions at this point? Yes, if you signed up today, so there's a question that says, will we be sent a copy of the PowerPoint slides? Yes, you will get an email with this PowerPoint in it. Any more questions? Are there any more questions at this point? You should have gotten an email this morning with a link to the presentation. So hopefully you got the email this morning. If you didn't, let us know. But you should have gotten an email this morning with a link to the presentation itself. So that way you will have the PowerPoint slides if you want them. If there's no more questions, then thank you for attending today. I appreciate your time.